the CTO here at Particle. We affectionately know him as Doc, and he, in light of his expertise in the industry, is going to speak to us about one of the most important concerns surrounding IoT, which is security. So please give him a warm welcome.
Thank you very much, Brittany. All right. The day has run a little bit late. We've got about 15 minutes of me between you and happy hour. So I'm going to compress this presentation, which will be just fine because, spoiler alert, there's one slide that really matters. So it's okay. As long as we get to that slide, we're fine. Let's talk about security. Here are the three sections of the presentation. Current state of security in IoT, 3 principles that you can follow, and the particle approach. So here is this current state. So put yourself in the shoes of the CSO or the head of cybersecurity at your organization or any large enterprise, and think for a second about what keeps you up at night. So what are the current threats out there? Just take a step back from IoT and think about cybersecurity in general. Today, in Q3 2018, these are the ones that are really top of mind. So DDoS, or distributed denial of service, this is one that many of you may understand is directly influenced by IoT. Mirai botnet, blah, 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 we can talk more about that. But these other 3 are huge risks, huge threats that CSOs are really worried about. Phishing, there's this concept introduced by Lockheed Martin based on military history. For attacks, cyber attacks, there's this concept of the kill chain. And any successful attack these days on any organization usually starts with some reconnaissance, finding out something about your target, and eventually you get in through phishing, you get someone to download some kind of payload that gets you a beachhead in that organization. So phishing is almost always where the big breaches that we all hear about started some months before the big breaking news. So phishing is a huge concern. Ransomware earlier this year and late last year was a big deal, but we'll talk about cryptojacking is the new thing that everybody's worried about because it's changed the business model in the minds of the attackers. So let's talk about DDoS for a second. I think everybody here can understand a bit more intuitively the threat related to IoT of distributed denial of service attacks. So I won't read through this entire slide. You can read it yourself, but this is a quick history of the last 3 years of the really high-profile DDoS attacks. This has become such a cultural phenomenon that you can now just say the word Mirai botnet or Mirai botnet. You can say those words, and everyone's like, "Oh yeah, I know that was a big deal." Especially that October 21st, 2016 attack, where they attacked a DNS service provider and consequently took down most of the east coast of the US internet. But that's not where it stopped. And these things keep getting bigger all the time, to where this year we broke through all the records anybody thought could ever be surpassed with these DDoS attacks. First hitting 1.3 terabits a second. That is an incredible amount of data being thrown at a server due to a vulnerability in some deployments of memcache. First took down GitHub in February, and then in March on a wired telecommunications provider in the US that sort of has not broadly been disclosed. So these things keep getting bigger, and that one was a whopping 1.7 terabits. There is essentially no site on the planet that can withstand that kind of traffic. So people are really worried about these kinds of things. So here are some other major events in those other categories. The Sony Pictures hack started with phishing. 80 million medical records stolen from Anthem. That one came down to 5 employees opening a phishing email. and that led to eventually the theft of 80 million medical records. When I was reading about this one, reportedly when sold on the black market, stolen health records are worth 10 times more than a credit card theft. So very lucrative business for the attackers. Those phishing emails paid off really well. So ransomware, there was a big attack in 2017 called WannaCry. Hit Windows computers, was eventually attributed to North Korea. But you can see the total payout. It caused a whole lot of hullabaloo in the cybersecurity industry, but the eventual payout was not that great. Like some small number of the attacked organizations ended up paying some amount of money. And ransomware, in case you don't know, the way this works is your computer pops up a message, says, hey, your entire computer has been encrypted. You don't have any of your data. I can give it back to you if you pay me money. I'll decrypt it for you. That's what a ransomware attack is. And so if you pay the ransom, usually to a Bitcoin address, then if that is a genuine promise, if they can deliver on it, then they'll decrypt and you get your files back. Sometimes these things they actually just destroy the data and you pay them and you don't get anything back. But cryptojacking is this new thing where attackers have figured out, and this has increased 141% between the back half of last year and the first half of this year, where instead of spraying a ransomware worm at as many people as you can and trying to get someone to pay you, you can instead just take little slices of compute on a bunch of different servers, a bunch of different computers, a bunch of different routers, whatever it is, and use all of that to just mine Bitcoin, add it to your mining pool, and you can keep everyone, the victims don't know that you're there, and you let everything keep running as normal. You just take a bit of the compute, and you're making yourself money. It's this like slow and steady, reliable revenue stream, and this has increased a great deal in the last year, and a lot of directors of IT are really worried about this. So we had this slide in Zach's keynote this morning. IoT attacks increased 600%. They're going up. We've all seen these graphs where the number of devices deployed are dramatically going up. And what this means is that the attack surface, the potential attack surface, is getting huge. There are going to soon be 3 IoT devices out there for every human being on the planet. These things are typically not well protected. Historically, Particle's helping to make that better. And as creators of IoT products, you need to be conscious of not becoming so much of this problem. And this is, again, such common knowledge now. Everybody knows, oh yeah, IoT is totally insecure, that trust has been lost when regulators start getting involved. Last week, Governor Jerry Brown of California signed into law the first bill of this kind, requiring manufacturers of IoT devices to put in some reasonable security measures. This bill doesn't have a lot of teeth. The requirements they're very baseline. It's very basic. It just says, please, do the bare minimum. If you make an IoT device, don't make the username admin and the password admin on every single device ever. That's basically what the law says. It says give every device a unique password or require that the user change it from the default before they get access. And if you do that, then the Mirai botnet doesn't happen. So in the last 5 minutes before happy hour, I am going to talk about the 3 principles that you should follow as the creator of an IoT product. So it's important to recognize with these IoT products, we buy any of these, an extreme trucking device, a fan protecting us from the grapes from frost. Who's responsible for security of that device? It's the creator of the device. The truck company, the owner of the truck who buys the truck wings, they say, extreme trucking, you sold me a thing. If it's insecure, I blame you, right? So it doesn't matter what providers are used in, the servers might be Amazon, and the hardware might be Particle, and the cloud service might be Particle, and this sensor might have been bought from this distributor, and you have all these other parties, but ultimately, they're going to blame you, the product creator, if something goes wrong. So, how do you do it? Here's the one slide. If you remember nothing else in this presentation, remember these 3 things. So Avoid open ports. That means don't listen for connections from the outside, because you can't know who is on the other side of that sending you some random set of data that you're supposed to respond to. Avoid those open ports. Encrypt all the communications, even when you don't think you need to. Like, oh, this data is not that sensitive. Please, just trust me. Encrypt all the communications. And remember that people are the weakest link. You can make an incredibly secure system from a technology perspective. You can build in all these protections. But then if somebody who manages the servers gets phished and they tell somebody some information about themselves, which an attacker then uses to go get their password to log into these servers, it doesn't matter all the other protections because they've got the password of the guy who owns all the systems. So now that attacker owns all the systems. I'll just burn through these last few slides and then have a couple minutes for questions. Avoiding open ports, this is one reason that Particle prefers, a lower bill of materials is another reason, but preferring microcontroller designs is inherently more secure. If you use a full operating system, you buy something off the shelf that comes with Linux, comes with Android, comes with some installation of Windows, there are services running on there, and there are ports open, and that thing will respond to commands from the outside that anyone sends it, unless you go and actively close all those things down, and that is a great deal of work that you shouldn't be focusing on when we should be focusing on your IoT go-to-market. If you really need to accept connections, which sometimes there are legitimate reasons for this in certain products, you need to be intentionally designing those open ports for attacks. And you can talk to me later if you think you need to do that. I'll discourage it, and if you can convince me you need to, I'll give you some recommendations. Encrypting all communications, everything inbound and outbound must be encrypted, and you want to use really standard algorithms that can ensure all three of confidentiality, authenticity, and integrity. There are certain algorithms that only ensure some of these things, not all of them. And so if the data is confidential, so somebody in the middle listening can't read it, and you have integrity, so if somebody flips some zeros to ones along the way, you can detect that. But you don't have authenticity, if you can't mathematically prove the identity of the person sending you the message, then you don't have anything. It doesn't matter that the message was secret because you don't know who's sending you the message. So good standard encryption algorithms, like the ones that underlie TLS, which is what we use in our browsers with our banks all the time, those provide these guarantees. If you're doing anything non-standard, you need to specifically look for those properties. Don't roll your own. Rolling your own encryption is a bad idea. And remember that people are the weakest link, as this last slide really quick. Multifactor authentication is a huge level up in protection. Particle just released multifactor authentication. I see people cheering in the back. A couple weeks ago. If you value the things that you have, the products you have in the Particle console, please make sure all the team members who have access to that product go turn on multifactor authentication. Google has not had any of its 85,000 employees successfully phished on their work-related accounts since early 2017, when they began requiring all employees to use these hardware keys called YubiKeys. I have one of these things. It is great. It works with lots of different systems. Any system that I have told I have this cryptographic key, if I go to log into it, they say, great, insert your hardware key. It doesn't even matter if I told you my password, because if you don't have this, you can't get into the account. So 85,000 people, none of whom have gotten phished in over a year, is pretty telling evidence. Multi-factor authentication, there are lots of different ways you can do that. Highly recommend it. And let's just stop there and take questions. Anybody have questions about IoT security? Or should we start drinking? Alex. Yeah. I spoke too clearly.
I thought it wasn't happening. I was so happy it did. But
Me personally? 0. Different strokes for different folks. Yeah. Any other questions? All right, well, I'm happy to, oh yeah, go ahead. Yeah. No, we don't. We don't. That would be great. With the multi-factor that we support is the typical token-based authentication like Google Authenticator or Authy, which is also very strong. And there's another kind of multi-factor authentication out there based on SMS. You log into a site and they say, okay, we'll send you a text, and by entering the number we sent you over text, you can get in. That is certainly better than not having multi-factor at all, but it has some serious flaws. Reddit had a big data breach recently because someone was able to gain control of a SIM card. You can call up T-Mobile and say, hey, sorry, I lost my SIM card, and you pretend to be a certain person, and they switch over the number to a different SIM card, and they got the code, and then we're able to log in. So SMS is like, the token-based ones are much more secure than that, and hardware is, keys are arguably more secure than that, but they're all better than not having multi-factor. Yeah. All right. Oh, Richard. Yeah. Yep. I would say we use standard algorithms that ensure those properties that I talked about before. That is what all good encryption does. It is, mathematically proven that these things are guaranteed given certain conditions, given the private key remains secret, et cetera. And that is how Particle works. So not only are all the cloud communications between the cloud and device encrypted, the API is only accessible over HTTPS. And even when we do, like with the new mesh products, there's a setup process that many of you may have gone through with your device. That also, Bluetooth Low Energy, BLE, has its own encryption, but we did not find it compelling enough it wasn't enough. We added encryption on top of BLE, so there's an application layer encryption when you are typing your mesh network password or you're asking the device for information related to the mesh network it's on. We added an encryption layer on top of that.
Kind of general question in terms of keeping your passwords.
Mm-hmm. Right. Sure. Let's see. Did I have this here? Yeah, totally. Some people are nerdy enough to be willing to do this, or they work at Google and they're required to. But yeah, so using a password manager, LastPass, KeePass, 1Password, all those things, those are great. When you're worried about them getting hacked, here's the deal. They design their system so they don't have your passwords. They have encrypted garbage that they can't, so if you lose your master password, they can't help you get it back. Sometimes they build in some kind of recovery mechanism that still doesn't give them the ability to see your passwords. So what that means is that if those companies get hacked, the hackers they'll get something. They may get that encrypted, blob that is all your passwords, but if you use a strong password as your master password, then they're never going to be able to get anything valuable out of that. So I appreciate the thoughtful skepticism there, but those companies, they don't want that liability, right? That they recognize that makes them a huge target. If they're just holding in clear text in their database all your passwords, like they're hacked in 3 hours, like. Yeah. It's a huge problem. Yeah, thank you. And it doesn't get as much attention. It's a great point. I'll just say yes. What she said. The right thing to do, here's my recommendation, is anytime you, it's a habit you have to build. It's a mental habit. It's a self-awareness habit. Anytime you send any kind of information, whether it's just an email saying to the babysitter saying like, hey, we're going to be out of town on this time. Can you help us out, or something like this? That has information about you in it. A malicious person with that information could use it to do something. Like, we communicate all the time, giving in lots of different ways over many media, giving information about ourselves. That is fine, and we have to build real face-to-face trust networks all the time. That's why we feel comfortable doing that. But recognize that, yeah, when you send email, lots of computer systems see the plain text content of that email. With text messages, similarly, those things can sort of be sniffed out of the air with very little work. It's becoming more and more common that messaging systems are end-to-end encrypted. So Signal, WhatsApp, Signal is now used under the hood by Facebook Messenger, and then there's Telegram. All these systems have a method for when you send a chat to somebody, no one can read it other than you and the actual intended recipient. It's encrypted all the way in between. So if you're ever saying something where you're like, I wouldn't want any random person to see this, it's probably better to send it via one of those methods than by email or text. And with that closing thought, let's go out and have some drinks. Thank you all very much. I'm happy to talk about this topic anytime.